My name is Dee Williams, 32 years old, and I was dreading this family reunion more than a root canal. After losing my job at Morgan Stanley last month, facing my successful brother Jason was the last thing I needed. But I put on my brave face and my designer dress, hoping that just this once we could get through a family gathering without him turning it into another opportunity to humiliate me. If only I had known what was coming, I might have prepared better for the storm about to hit. Before I continue this painful memory, let me know where you are watching from, and subscribe if you have ever had a family member try to tear you down. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. The Williams family has always been a picture of success on the outside. My father built his real estate empire from nothing, turning a small construction business into a multi-million-dollar corporation over 40 years. My mother came from old money and used her connections to help my father climb the social ladder. Together, they created the perfect American dream family. At least that was the image they projected to the world. For as long as I can remember my brother Jason, 5 years my senior, was the golden child. He played football in high school, graduated from Harvard Business School with honors, and joined my father in the family business, quickly becoming the heir apparent to the Williams fortune. I, on the other hand, chose a different path. After graduating with my finance degree from NYU, I decided to make my own way in investment banking. I wanted to prove that I could succeed without riding on my family name. For 10 years, I worked my way up at Morgan Stanley, specializing in emerging markets and technology investments. I had built a solid reputation and an impressive client portfolio, something I achieved entirely on my own merit. Dee was always the stubborn one, my mother would say at family gatherings, as if my independence was a character flaw rather than a strength. She never wants our help even when she needs it. Jason would usually chime in with something like, "That is because little sis is still trying to prove she is as good as big brother." His comments always came with that practice laugh that made it sound like a joke, though we both knew it was not. The pattern started when we were children. If I got an A on a test, Jason would point out that he got an A+. When I won second place in a swim meet, he would conveniently mention his 3 first-place trophies. As adults, the competition only intensified. Jason seemed physically incapable of complimenting my achievements without somehow diminishing them in comparison to his own. Our parents never intervened. In fact, they often reinforced the dynamic. "Jason is just naturally gifted," my father would say, as if my own accomplishments came from mere luck rather than hard work and intelligence. My mother would add, "He is the firstborn son, Dee. That comes with certain expectations." The layoff from Morgan Stanley was not due to my performance. The firm had lost a major client and was cutting costs across all departments. 20% of the staff was let go, including several executives with more seniority than me. But I knew how Jason would spin it. In his narrative, I would be the failure who could not hold down a job while conveniently leaving out the economic factors beyond my control. What my family did not know was that the layoff had actually accelerated plans I had been working on for nearly 2 years. Using the knowledge and connections I had built over my decade in finance, I had been quietly developing an investment strategy focusing on sustainable technology. I had already secured interest from several angel investors who believed in my vision. 3 weeks before the family reunion, I had a meeting with Franklin Hayes, CEO of Hayes Innovation Capital, one of the most respected investment firms in clean energy. Hayes had reviewed my portfolio and strategy and was impressed enough to consider a substantial investment in my new venture. We were in the final stages of negotiation with the paperwork almost ready to sign. "Your approach to evaluating long-term sustainability metrics is unlike anything I have seen," Hayes had told me during our last meeting. "Most analysts are still focused on quarterly returns, but you are looking 10 years ahead." Despite the positive developments in my professional life, I still felt that familiar knot of anxiety as I drove to my parents' estate for the annual Williams family reunion. The 5-acre property in Greenwich, Connecticut, featured a main house that could easily fit 4 average families, a pool house larger than most apartments and gardens that required a full-time staff to maintain. As I pulled my modest Audi into the circular driveway already filled with luxury vehicles, I spotted Jason's Bentley parked prominently near the front entrance. Of course, he would ensure his car was displayed like a trophy. I took a deep breath, checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, and prepared myself for the inevitable barrage of subtle and not-so-subtle jabs from my brother. "D. You made it, my Aunt Catherine," exclaimed as I entered the grand foyer. Her genuine warmth was a welcome contrast to the practiced smiles I expected from my immediate family. "We have all been so worried about you since we heard about Morgan Stanley." "Thank you, but I am doing fine, really," I assured her, accepting her embrace. Sometimes unexpected changes open new doors. I spent the next half hour circulating among extended family members, catching up with cousins, and answering polite questions about my future plans. I kept my responses vague, but optimistic, not yet ready to reveal my upcoming venture. The fact that Jason had not yet approached me gave me a false sense of security. That illusion shattered when I felt a heavy hand on my shoulder and smelled the expensive cologne my brother always wore too much of. "Well, if it is not my little sister, the recently unemployed investment banker Jason," said loudly enough for nearby conversations to pause. His perfect white teeth gleamed in what outsiders might mistake for a friendly smile. "Do not worry," I told Dad. "I could always find something for you in the mailroom at Williams Development." And so it began, the first of many barbs that would only get worse as the day progressed. The Williams family reunion was always an extravagant affair. No expense spared, no opportunity missed to showcase the family wealth and status. This year was no exception. The sprawling backyard had been transformed into what looked like a scene from The Great Gatsby, complete with white linen-covered tables, crystal champagne flutes, and a string quartet playing softly in the background. My cousin Amanda found me as I was trying to enjoy a moment of solitude near the rose garden. Unlike most of the family, Amanda had never bought into the Jason worship. She had seen through his facade years ago. "I see Jason is already in rare form today," she said, handing me a glass of champagne. "I overheard him telling Uncle Robert about how he saved you from complete financial ruin after the layoff." I nearly choked on my drink. He did what I have not taken a penny from him or anyone in this family. Amanda shook her head. "You know Jason. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story that makes him look like a hero." I felt my phone vibrate in my clutch purse for the third time in 20 minutes. I discreetly checked the screen to see another message from Franklin Hayes's office. The final contract had been delivered for my review, and Hayes himself wanted to discuss a few last-minute details before signing tomorrow. "Important call?" Amanda asked, noticing my expression. "Just work stuff," I replied, not ready to share my news yet, even with Amanda. "Work stuff? I thought you were between jobs right now." The voice came from behind me, and I did not need to turn to know it was Jason, who had apparently been eavesdropping on our conversation. "There are many kinds of work, Jason," I replied, slipping my phone back into my purse. "Not all of it happens in Daddy's company." Jason's face tightened momentarily before his practiced smile returned. "Speaking of Daddy's company, we just closed the Henderson development deal. $30 million project, largest in company history. What have you been up to since clearing out your desk at Morgan Stanley? Updating your resume?" Before I could respond, he continued, his voice getting slightly louder as he noticed others were within earshot. "You know, Dee, there is no shame in asking for help. Everyone fails sometimes. Well, not everyone, but you know what I mean." I felt my cheeks flush, but maintained my composure. "I appreciate your concern, Jason, but I am doing just fine." "Of course you are," he said, patting my shoulder condescendingly. "Always the independent one. Hey, did I mention Lauren and I just bought a vacation home in Aspen? You should come visit sometime. When you can afford the flight, of course." As Jason walked away to rejoin a group of admiring uncles and cousins, Amanda squeezed my arm supportively. "One day he is going to choke on his own ego. I just hope I am there to see it." I smiled weakly, but my mind flashed back to last Thanksgiving when Jason had spent the entire dinner recounting my failed relationship with a colleague at Morgan Stanley, spinning it into a cautionary tale about workplace romances and poor judgment. He had reduced me to tears that night, something I had promised myself would never happen again. My phone buzzed once more. This time it was a direct message from Franklin Hayes. "Looking forward to making the announcement official tomorrow. You are going to shake up this industry, Dee." I allowed myself a small smile. If only they knew what was coming. Everyone, dinner is served. My mother's voice carried across the garden, and the crowd began moving toward the large tent where the catering staff had set up an elaborate buffet and formal dining area. Predictably, Jason maneuvered himself to sit at the head of the main table next to my father. I found a seat near the middle between Amanda and our quiet cousin Michael, hoping to enjoy at least part of the meal in relative peace. As the first course was served, I received yet another text. Contract signed on my end. All systems go. Might drop by to congratulate you in person today if time permits. My heart skipped a beat. Hayes coming here, today. Part of me panicked at the thought, while another part thrilled at the perfect timing. I quickly texted back, giving him the address, but warning him about the family gathering. His response was immediate. Even better. Let them all hear the good news at once. Across the table, I noticed Jason's wife, Lauren, watching me with curious eyes. Unlike her husband, Lauren had always been kind to me, though she was careful not to contradict Jason openly. She offered me a small smile, which I returned. I sometimes wondered what she really thought about the family dynamics she had married into. As the main course was being served, Jason stood and tapped his knife against his crystal water glass. The conversations around the tables gradually quieted. I would like to propose a toast, he announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to commanding attention, to family, to success, and to supporting each other through good times and bad. Everyone raised their glasses, but I knew from the glint in Jason's eye that he was not finished. My stomach tightened in anticipation of what was coming next. Jason raised his glass higher, his smile widening as all eyes focused on him. And speaking of supporting each other through bad times, I think we should acknowledge my sister Dee. The knot in my stomach tightened. Here it comes. As most of you know, my little sister recently experienced a setback in her career. His voice dripped with false sympathy. After trying so hard to make it on her own, Dee has found herself once again in need of family support. A few uncomfortable glances were exchanged around the table. Most of the family knew about my layoff from Morgan Stanley, but Jason was already twisting the narrative. Dee has always been determined to prove she could succeed without the Williams name, he continued, his voice growing louder. And while I admire her independence, I think we can all agree that sometimes accepting help is the wiser choice. I sat frozen, my face burning, as dozens of eyes turned toward me. Jason was just getting started. So I want to make an announcement, he said, his smile now almost predatory. For those who have not heard yet, my sister is jobless again. The words boomed across the gathering, and a few people actually chuckled, assuming this was leading to some kind of supportive gesture from Jason. They did not know my brother like I did. This is what Dee, the third position you have lost in 10 years. He was deliberately miscounting, making it sound like a pattern rather than a company-wide layoff. Actually, Jason, that is not accurate, I began, but he spoke over me, his voice drowning out mine. Always the same story. Company restructuring, department elimination, budget cuts. He made air quotes around each excuse. Strange how these things keep happening to you but not to other finance professionals I know. Some of the older relatives were now nodding along with Jason, buying into his fabricated narrative. My parents sat silently, my father looking vaguely uncomfortable, but making no move to intervene. My mother nervously rearranging her silverware. But do not worry, everyone. Jason continued, raising his voice even more. I have a suggestion for my sister's next career move. I felt Amanda's hand close around mine under the table, offering silent support. Since traditional finance does not seem to be working out, perhaps Dee should consider other options. He paused for effect. Maybe stripping. I hear the pay is good for those who can, market their assets effectively. Shocked gasps and uncomfortable laughter rippled through the gathering. I felt as though I had been doused in ice water. Had my brother really just suggested I become a stripper in front of our entire extended family? My face burned so hot I thought I might pass out. My heart hammered against my ribs as though trying to escape. The sound of blood rushing filled my ears, nearly drowning out the continued laughter from some of the cousins who always followed Jason's lead. Lauren hissed, clearly mortified by her husband's suggestion, but he ignored her. What, I am just trying to help, he said, feigning innocence. Dee has always been proud of her figure. Might as well put it to use now that her brain power is not in demand. I wanted to run. Every instinct told me to get up, walk out, and never look back. But something kept me glued to my seat. Maybe it was knowing that running would only reinforce Jason's narrative of my failure. Or maybe it was the message still lighting up my phone screen, reminding me that everything was about to change. Or perhaps Jason continued warming to his topic she could try being a trophy wife. Though based on her dating history, that might be challenging too. He was referring to my broken engagement 3 years earlier, another painful experience he had delighted in dissecting for family entertainment. Remember that investment banker she was engaged to? What was his name? The one who left her for his administrative assistant Jason turned to our mother. Mom, you remember him. The one Dee brought to the Christmas party right before he dumped her. Jason, that is enough, my father finally said, though his tone lacked real conviction. It was more about maintaining appearances than defending me. Dad, I am just concerned about my sister, Jason replied, not looking concerned in the slightest. She keeps making the same mistakes in her career and personal life. Someone needs to give her some honest feedback. My phone buzzed again in my lap. I glanced down to see Hayes's message. 5 minutes away. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. If I could just endure this humiliation for a few minutes longer, everything would change. But Jason was nowhere near finished. The problem, Dee, is that you have always thought you were special, that you were somehow better than the family business, too good to work with your father and brother. And where has that gotten you unemployed at 32 while the rest of us continue to thrive? He gestured around the table at our relatives. Everyone here has tried to help you. We have offered connections, opportunities, advice, but you have rejected it all because of your pride. That was a blatant lie. No one had offered me genuine help, only condescending suggestions that always involved working under Jason in some capacity. I think it is time you accept reality, Jason concluded, his voice dropping into a mock sympathetic tone. You are not cut out for the high-powered finance world you thought you belonged in. There is no shame in admitting that you have failed. As those words hung in the air, I noticed several heads turn toward the house. Through the open doors of the tent, I could see a sleek black car pulling into the driveway. A chauffeur quickly exited and opened the rear door. Jason, caught up in his moment of triumph, had not noticed the new arrival. So, little sister, what do you have to say for yourself? Ready to finally admit you need your big brother's help? Before I could respond, a commanding voice called from the entrance to the tent. Excuse me, I am looking for Dee Williams. Every head turned toward the voice. Standing at the entrance was Franklin Hayes, CEO of Hayes Innovation Capital, one of the most recognizable figures in American finance. At 58, Hayes cut an impressive figure in his custom-tailored suit. His silver hair and confident stance projected authority, and the subtle Hayes Company pin on his lapel announced his identity to anyone familiar with the business world. Mr. Hayes, my father stood immediately, recognition dawning on his face. Franklin Hayes was a legend in investment circles, his firm managing over $20 billion in assets. What an unexpected pleasure. I am Richard Williams. Hayes nodded politely, but his eyes continued scanning the crowd until they landed on me. His face broke into a genuine smile. Ah, there you are, Dee. Sorry to interrupt your family gathering, but I was in the area and thought I would deliver the news in person rather than wait until tomorrow. I stood on slightly shaky legs, acutely aware of the confused expressions around me, especially Jason's. His face had transformed from smugness to bewilderment in seconds. Mr. Hayes, what a surprise, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Everyone, this is Franklin Hayes, CEO of Hayes Innovation Capital. Please, just Franklin, he said, striding confidently through the tables toward me. He extended his hand, which I shook firmly. I hope you do not mind the intrusion, but I think this calls for a proper celebration. Jason quickly recovered from his initial shock and moved to insert himself into the interaction. Mr. Hayes, Jason Williams, President of Williams Development. It is an honor to meet you. May I ask what brings you to our family gathering? Hayes gave Jason a brief, professional smile without warmth. Your sister, of course. He turned back to me. The legal team just confirmed everything is finalized. As of 3 p.m. today, Hayes Innovation Capital is proud to be partnered with the newest and most innovative investment firm to hit the market this year. A murmur ran through the assembled family members. My mother's perfectly manicured hand flew to her pearl necklace. Partner, my father asked, looking between Hayes and me with growing curiosity. Hayes placed a hand on my shoulder. Did Dee not tell you? She has just secured a $10 million investment from our firm to launch Williams Strategic Investments specializing in sustainable technology and renewable energy funding. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the mental calculations happening in everyone's minds as they processed this information. $10 million. Jason finally sputtered, his face flushing red. There must be some mistake. My sister just lost her job at Morgan Stanley. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Lost her job, is that what she told you? He chuckled and looked at me with newfound respect. Modest as always, Dee. He turned to address the entire gathering. Dee did not lose her job. She left Morgan Stanley over a month ago to focus on launching her own firm. We have been in negotiations for weeks, and I must say your sister drove a hard bargain. I watched as understanding slowly dawned on my relatives' faces. My departure from Morgan Stanley had not been a failure but a calculated career move. I had not been seeking employment, I had been building my own company. But Jason began struggling to realign his narrative. Why would you not tell us this, Dee? Why let everyone think you were unemployed? I finally found my voice. I did not want to make any announcements until everything was finalized. Today was supposed to be about family, not business. Hayes nodded approvingly. Always the professional. That is one of the many reasons we decided to back her venture. Dee has developed an investment model that could revolutionize how we evaluate sustainable technologies. Her proposal was the most impressive I have seen in 20 years. My parents had now moved closer. My father's expression morphing from confusion to calculated interest, my mother already plastering on the smile she reserved for important connections. Dee, darling, this is wonderful news, my mother gushed suddenly, acting as though she had always been my biggest supporter. We are so proud of you. Indeed, my father added, extending his hand to Hayes. The Williams family has always valued innovation and entrepreneurship. Dee comes from a long line of business leaders. I bit back a retort about their previous lack of support. This was neither the time nor place to air those grievances. Hayes seemed to read the undercurrents perfectly. Yes, Dee mentioned her family background, though she was quite insistent that this venture succeed entirely on its own merits without leveraging the Williams name or connections. Quite admirable in my opinion. Jason, now visibly struggling to process how quickly his moment of triumph had turned to embarrassment, attempted to salvage the situation. Well, of course we would have supported her if she had told us. As I was just saying before you arrived, our family always stands together. Several relatives who had been laughing at his jokes minutes earlier now averted their eyes, suddenly finding their dessert plates fascinating. Actually, Hayes said, his tone pleasant but firm, I believe I arrived just as you were suggesting alternative career paths for your sister. Something about stripping, was it? The color drained from Jason's face as Hayes continued. An unusual suggestion for someone with an MBA from NYU, 10 years of experience at Morgan Stanley, and who just secured one of the largest startup investments my firm has made this year. Lauren, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes, suddenly stood up from beside Jason. Mr. Hayes, would you care for some champagne? I believe this calls for a toast to Dee's success. As Lauren guided a server toward Hayes, I caught her whispered, I am so sorry, as she passed me. For the first time, I felt a twinge of sympathy for my sister-in-law, who had to live with Jason's toxic ego every day. Hayes accepted a glass of champagne and raised it high. To Dee Williams, founder and CEO of Williams Strategic Investments, our newest partner and a financial visionary deserving of respect. As glasses were raised around the table, I locked eyes with Jason. His earlier smirk had vanished, completely replaced by a look I had never seen before, fear. For the first time in our adult lives, the power dynamic had shifted, and he knew it. After the toast, the family gathering shifted dramatically. Where Jason had once been the center of attention, relatives now gravitated toward Hayes and me, eager to hear about the new venture, and suddenly discovering a deep interest in sustainable technology investments. My parents hovered nearby, occasionally interjecting comments to suggest they had always supported my independent career path. Jason had retreated to a corner of the tent, nursing a scotch and glowering at the scene. I excused myself from a conversation with Hayes and an enthusiastic uncle to step inside the house for a moment of quiet. I needed to process everything that had just happened. I was standing in my father's study when I heard the door open and close behind me. I turned to find Jason, his expression dark and his movements slightly unsteady from alcohol. "You planned this," he accused, pointing an unsteady finger at me. "You deliberately let me humiliate myself before bringing in your big-shot investor." I shook my head. "I did not plan anything, Jason. Hayes decided to come by on his own after signing the contract. The timing was coincidental." "Bullshit," he spat. "You've been setting this up for weeks. Letting everyone think you were a failure just so you could spring this dramatic revelation. Always had to be the center of attention, even as a kid." The irony of Jason accusing me of attention-seeking was almost laughable. "Is that really what you think this is about?" "Attention." I kept my voice calm and controlled. "I have spent years building toward this moment, Jason. Years of work while you were busy taking credit for Dad's success and putting me down at every opportunity." "Oh, please spare me the victim narrative," he scoffed. "You have always had everything handed to you, the baby of the family, the princess who got away with everything." "Got away with what exactly?" I challenged him. "Working 60-hour weeks to prove myself, being passed over for promotions because I refused to use the Williams name, enduring your constant belittling at every family gathering." Jason waved dismissively. "Typical D, always exaggerating. I have just been trying to toughen you up for the real world." "The real world," I repeated incredulously. "You would not survive a day in my real world, Jason. You have never had to earn anything on your own merit." His face flushed with anger. "I run a multi-million-dollar company." "You run Dad's company," I corrected him. "The company he built and handed to you on a silver platter. What have you actually created on your own?" Jason stepped closer, his finger jabbing the air between us. "You think you are so smart, you think one investor makes you successful. I have connections you could only dream of." "Then why do you feel so threatened by me?" I asked quietly. The question hit home. Jason's expression flickered, revealing a moment of raw insecurity before his anger returned. "I am not threatened by you," he insisted, but the slight quiver in his voice betrayed him. "I am concerned that you are in over your head. Hayes is a shark. He will chew you up and spit you out the first time you make a mistake." "Your concern is touching," I said dryly. "But Hayes invested in me because of my track record and my vision, not because of my last name. Can you say the same about your position at Williams Development?" Jason's face darkened. "You always thought you were better than the family business. Too good to work with your father and brother." "I never said that. I wanted to succeed on my own terms, not live in your shadow." "My shadow," Jason laughed bitterly. "Is that what this is about, jealousy?" "Projection much," I raised an eyebrow. "You are the one who has spent years trying to undermine me, Jason. Every achievement, every milestone, you have found a way to diminish or dismiss. That is ridiculous." "Is it? What about Sanderson Tech?" I asked, referencing a company I knew would trigger him. Jason stiffened visibly. "What about it?" "You told everyone at Christmas that I made a terrible investment recommendation on that stock, that I nearly cost Morgan Stanley millions. But you conveniently left out that you had personally invested heavily in their competitor and lost a fortune when Sanderson's new product line took off. How did you know about that?" Jason's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I know a lot more than you think, Jason, including the fact that I now own controlling interest in the holding company that acquired the tech firm you lost $3 million investing in last year." His eyes widened in shock. "Apex Holdings. That was you." I nodded. "Through a shell corporation. I have been planning this move for years, Jason, not to hurt you but to build something of my own. The fact that it overlapped with your bad investment was just, what would you call it? A happy coincidence." The study door opened and our parents entered immediately, sensing the tension. "There you two are," our mother said, with forced brightness. "Everyone is asking for you, Dee. Mr. Hayes is telling the most fascinating stories about your negotiations." "Is everything all right?" our father asked, looking between us with concern. "Fine, Dad," Jason said tightly. "Just congratulating my sister on her success." My father nodded, then fixed me with an evaluative stare. "10 million is quite an investment, Dee. Hayes must see something special in your proposal." "He does," I confirmed. "But this is just the beginning. We are already in talks with 3 other major investment groups." "You know," my father said thoughtfully, "Williams Development has been considering diversifying into more sustainable projects. Perhaps there could be some synergy between our companies." I recognized the offer for what it was. Not support for me, but an opportunity to bring my success under the family umbrella, to absorb and control it. "That is an interesting thought, Dad," I said diplomatically. "But for now, I need to establish Williams Strategic Investments as an independent entity." Hayes was particularly interested in my autonomous approach to the market. My father's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Like Jason, he was unaccustomed to hearing no. "Well, we should rejoin our guests," my mother interjected, sensing the brewing tension. "It is not every day we have someone of Mr. Hayes's stature at our home." As we moved to leave the study, Jason caught my arm. "This is not over, Dee," he whispered. "You think you have won, but you have no idea what you are up against in this business." I gently removed his hand. "That is where you are wrong, Jason. I know exactly what I am up against. I have had years of practice dealing with someone who would undermine me at every turn." When we returned to the gathering, I noticed several dynamics had shifted. Relatives who had previously gravitated toward Jason were now openly seeking my attention. Lauren was engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation with Hayes, occasionally glancing toward Jason with a complicated expression. As the afternoon progressed, I overheard snippets of conversations where relatives were reassessing their understanding of me. "Always knew she had potential." An uncle who had never shown interest in my career before was now claiming, "Just needed the right opportunity to shine." Jason made a few attempts to reassert his dominance, mentioning his latest development project whenever conversation focused too long on my new venture, but his efforts fell flat. The revelation of my success had permanently altered the family perception, and no amount of posturing could undo it. The most surprising moment came when Lauren approached me privately, as the gathering was winding down. "I always knew you were the smart one," she confided, glancing to ensure Jason was out of earshot. "He has been worried about you outshining him for years. That is why he works so hard to tear you down." "That does not excuse his behavior," I replied. "No, it does not," she agreed, surprising me with her candor. "For what it is worth, I have always admired how you have handled his attacks, with dignity and resilience." Her words gave me pause. I had never considered that others in the family might have seen through Jason's behavior or admired my response to it. As Hayes prepared to leave, he shook my hand firmly in front of the family. "Monday morning, 9 a.m. Your new office will be ready. Looking forward to making history together, Dee." "Thank you for your confidence, Franklin," I replied, aware of every pair of eyes watching this exchange. "Not confidence," he corrected with a smile. "Investment. I never back anything I do not believe will succeed spectacularly." As Hayes's car pulled away, Jason made one final desperate attempt to undermine me. "Well, little sister," he said loudly enough for nearby relatives to hear, "let us hope you do not disappoint your new benefactor. Would be a shame to lose such a prestigious connection after one day." I turned to face my brother, fully no longer intimidated by his attempts to diminish me. "You know, Jason, all these years I thought I needed your approval, or at least your acknowledgement. But today, I realized something important." "And what is that?" he asked with a sneer. "That your opinion of me has never mattered. What matters is what I know I can accomplish." I kept my voice even and controlled, but loud enough for others to hear. "I do not need to tear others down to feel successful. And I do not need to announce my achievements to know their worth." Jason's face contorted with suppressed rage, but for once he had no clever comeback, no cutting remark. He simply turned and walked away, the set of his shoulders betraying his defeat. For the first time in our adult lives, I had left Jason speechless, and that silence spoke volumes. 3 days after the family reunion, I sat in my new corner office at Williams Strategic Investments. The space occupied the 42nd floor of a sleek downtown building with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city. Hayes had insisted on prime real estate for his new partner firm, and the design team had created an environment that perfectly balanced professionalism with innovation. My assistant Tara knocked lightly on the open door. "Miss Williams, the final contract revisions from legal are ready for your review, and Mr. Hayes called to confirm your dinner meeting at 7. "Thank you, Tara," I replied, still adjusting to having an assistant of my own. At Morgan Stanley, I had been important, but never important enough for dedicated support staff. As Tara left, my phone chimed with a text message from my mother. "Darling, please call when you have a moment. Your father and I would love to see your new office. So proud of our entrepreneurial daughter." I set the phone down without responding. The sudden flood of supportive messages from my family over the past 3 days stood in stark contrast to their years of indifference. Now that I had proven my worth with a multi-million-dollar investment and partnership with Hayes, they were eager to claim connection to my success. My father had called twice already, each time circling back to the potential synergy between Williams Development and my new firm. I had politely but firmly explained that my investment strategy focused exclusively on sustainable technologies, an area his company had consistently avoided as too speculative. My phone rang again, this time displaying Amanda's number. "The prodigal cousin calls," I answered with genuine warmth. "The family revolutionary, you mean?" Amanda laughed. "Dee, you have no idea what you have done to the Williams family dynamic. It is like watching a reality show in real time." "That bad?" "That good," she corrected. "Jason has been practically apoplectic. Uncle Richard keeps telling everyone he always knew you had the Williams business instinct. And Aunt Evelyn is suddenly recalling how she encouraged your interest in finance when you were just a little girl." I could not help but laugh. Funny how memories evolve to fit the current narrative. "The best part," Amanda continued, "is that Lauren has been subtly distancing herself from Jason's more outrageous statements. At the garden club yesterday, she actually contradicted him when he tried to claim he had advised you on your business model. That surprised me. Lauren stood up to him publicly. Not just stood up to him, she corrected him with receipts. Apparently, she had kept track of some of his more dismissive comments about your career over the years and quoted them back to him. I wish I had recorded it." I felt a newfound respect for my sister-in-law. Perhaps she had been quietly observing and forming her own opinions all along. "How are you really doing with all this?" Amanda asked, her tone growing serious. "It is a lot of change very quickly." I gazed out at the city skyline, considering the question. Honestly, it feels surreal. After years of fighting for recognition and respect, suddenly everyone wants to be associated with me. Part of me is satisfied, but another part is wary, skeptical, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "All of the above," I admitted. "Plus, there is the actual work. This is everything I have been working toward, but now the real challenge begins." "If anyone can handle it, you can," Amanda assured me. "You have been preparing for this your whole life, whether you knew it or not." After we hung up, I returned to reviewing the final contracts, making notes on sections that needed clarification. I had been so focused that I almost missed the notification of a visitor in the lobby. "Miss Williams," Tara's voice came through the intercom. "There is a Lauren Williams here to see you. She does not have an appointment." I hesitated only briefly. "Send her up, please." Minutes later, Lauren stood in my office doorway looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Gone was the polished confidence of the Williams family spouse, replaced by something more authentic and vulnerable. "Your office is beautiful," she said, glancing around appreciatively. "Hayes Innovation Capital does not do anything halfway, do they?" "No, they do not," I agreed, gesturing for her to take a seat. "This is a surprise, Lauren." She sat smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. "I know we have never been close, Dee. That is partly my fault. I allowed Jason's attitude toward you to dictate our relationship." You were in a difficult position, I acknowledged. Jason is not an easy person to contradict. No, but that is not an excuse. She met my gaze directly. I should have made more effort to know you independently of him. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. The thing is, Lauren said, her voice dropping slightly, I have always admired how you carved your own path. I gave up my career in architecture when I married Jason because he wanted a wife who could focus on supporting his ambitions. This was news to me. I had no idea you were an architect. Almost was. I was a year away from completing my master's program when we got engaged. Jason made it clear that a Williams wife had certain responsibilities that would not accommodate a demanding career. I could easily imagine my brother making such demands. And now? Lauren straightened her shoulders. Now I am reconsidering that choice, watching you stand your ground at the reunion, seeing how you built something on your own terms. It made me realize how much I have compromised. Are you thinking of going back to architecture? I asked. Perhaps. Or finding some new direction. That is actually partly why I am here. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a slim folder. I have been working on some sustainable design concepts in my spare time. When I heard about your investment focus, I wondered if there might be projects where architectural innovation and sustainable technology could intersect. I accepted the folder, genuinely intrigued. I would be happy to look these over, Lauren. That is all I ask. An honest evaluation, not a favor to family. Her expression grew serious. And I want you to know that Jason does not know I am here. This is my initiative, not his attempt to gain access to your connections. I appreciate your transparency, I said, finding newfound respect for the woman I had previously seen only as an extension of my brother. After Lauren left, promising to meet for lunch the following week, regardless of my assessment of her designs, I returned to my contract review with a new perspective. Perhaps the family dynamics were more complex than I had realized, with currents of ambition and independence running beneath the surface of conformity. The rest of the week passed in a whirlwind of meetings, strategy sessions, and personnel decisions. Hayes had given me complete authority to build my team, and I was carefully selecting professionals who shared my vision for ethical investment in technologies that could genuinely improve the world while generating substantial returns. I had deliberately avoided contacting Jason, though I heard through family channels that his development company was facing challenges with the Henderson project he had so proudly announced at the reunion. Apparently, there were permit issues and community opposition to aspects of the design that failed to incorporate adequate environmental considerations. Part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction at his struggles, a human reaction to years of his gloating over my setbacks. But a wiser part recognized that continuing the cycle of competition and resentment would only perpetuate the toxic dynamic we had been trapped in for decades. When my phone displayed Jason's number on Friday afternoon, my first instinct was to let it go to voicemail. Instead, I took a deep breath and answered. Jason, this is unexpected. His voice sounded strained, lacking its usual confident bluster. D. I hope I am not interrupting your important new business. Already the conversation was veering toward his typical sarcasm. I chose not to engage. What can I do for you? A pause then. The Henderson project is facing some regulatory hurdles regarding environmental impact. Dad suggested that with your new focus on sustainable development, you might have some insight on navigating these requirements. It was as close to asking for help as Jason had ever come, wrapped in a thin veneer of professional consultation. I acknowledged neither agreeing nor refusing outright. It would depend on the specifics of the situation. Could we discuss it? Perhaps over lunch next week. The strain in his voice was more pronounced. Now the cost of this request to his pride, clearly substantial. I considered my response carefully. This was a pivotal moment in redefining our relationship. I could reject him as he had so often dismissed me, or I could open a door to something potentially healthier. I have time on Tuesday at noon, I said finally. There is a restaurant on the ground floor of my building. We can meet there. Tuesday. Noon, he repeated, sounding vaguely surprised that I had agreed. Thank you, Dee. As I ended the call, I realized something important. Jason's request, however, reluctant represented the first time in our adult lives that he had acknowledged my expertise as valuable. It was a small step, perhaps, but a step nonetheless toward a new dynamic. That evening, as I prepared for my dinner meeting with Hayes, I received an email that made me smile. One of my former colleagues at Morgan Stanley, a brilliant analyst who had also been laid off in the restructuring, had accepted my offer to join Williams Strategic Investments as head of research. "Your vision for the firm resonates with everything I have wanted to do in this industry," she wrote. "Creating wealth while creating positive change feels like the future of finance." I closed my laptop feeling a sense of purpose and satisfaction deeper than any I had known in my career. The family reunion that had begun with humiliation had triggered a cascade of changes, not just in my professional standing, but in my understanding of success itself. As I gathered my things to leave the office, I caught sight of my reflection in the window backdropped by the city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I recognized myself fully, not as Jason's little sister or Richard Williams's daughter, but as Dee Williams, founder and CEO, charting her own course in the world. 1 year after the fateful family reunion, I stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Hayes Innovation Capital headquarters, addressing an audience of investors, analysts, and media representatives. Williams Strategic Investments had just closed its second round of funding, bringing our total managed assets to over $50 million. And establishing us as one of the fastest-growing boutique investment firms, specializing in sustainable technologies. When we evaluate potential investments, I explain to the attentive crowd, we look beyond traditional metrics of quarterly returns. We consider the long-term impact, environmental sustainability, social responsibility, and governance transparency. These factors not only create a better world, but ultimately deliver superior returns for our investors. From my position on the stage, I could see Franklin Hayes nodding approvingly in the front row. Beside him sat my cousin Amanda, now our Director of Client Relations, and Lauren, who had joined the firm 6 months ago, to head our newly formed Sustainable Architecture division. In the year since Williams Strategic Investments launched, our family dynamics had evolved in ways I could never have predicted. My parents had gradually accepted that my success was not a passing phase or a lucky break, but the result of years of preparation and vision. They still occasionally suggested collaborations with the family business, but now approached these conversations with respect rather than condescension. Jason's journey had been the most surprising. After our lunch meeting to discuss the Henderson project, he had initially remained defensive and competitive. But when the project faced a serious setback that threatened to bankrupt Williams' development reality, had finally broken through his armor of arrogance. The turning point came 3 months after our lunch when Jason appeared at my office without an appointment, looking exhausted and humbled. "I need your help," he had said. Simply the 4 words, clearly costing him tremendous effort. Not a loan, not a bailout, your expertise. Rather than gloating or turning him away as he might have done to me, I had listened. The Henderson project had failed environmental impact assessments, and the resulting delays had triggered penalty clauses in the contracts that Williams Development could not absorb. What if we reimagined the entire development I had suggested? Not just making minimal changes to pass regulations, but transforming it into a showcase of sustainable design. Jason had initially balked at the idea, claiming it would be too expensive and too different from their established business model. But with his company facing potential bankruptcy, he had reluctantly agreed to consider it. Working together often with tension, but with a growing mutual respect, we had developed a new vision for the Henderson property. Lauren's architectural expertise proved invaluable, and with Williams Strategic Investments providing consultation on sustainable technology integration, the redesigned project eventually won awards for innovation and environmental responsibility. The experience had changed Jason, not overnight and not completely but meaningfully. His crisis had forced him to recognize the limitations of his approach to business and by extension to family relationships. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he had to acknowledge that he did not have all the answers, that others, including his often dismissed sister, possessed valuable knowledge and skills. Looking out at the audience now, I spotted Jason sitting near the back. He had asked to attend today's presentation, expressing genuine interest in understanding more about the sustainable investment strategies that had saved his company. Our relationship remained complicated with occasional flashes of old patterns, but we were learning a new way of interacting based on mutual respect rather than competition. After the presentation concluded, and I had answered questions from the audience, Jason approached me at the reception. "Impressive presentation," he said, and I could tell from his expression that the compliment was genuine. "You really understand this sector better than anyone." "Thank you," I replied, still sometimes unsure how to navigate these new, more positive interactions with my brother. "I have been thinking about what you said last month," he continued, referring to a conversation about Williams' development, potentially creating a sustainable construction division. "You were right. We need to adapt or become irrelevant." Coming from Jason, this acknowledgement of my insight was remarkable progress. "Change is hard," I said, understanding that for someone who had built his identity on never admitting weakness, these transitions must be extraordinarily challenging, but necessary. He nodded, glancing around at the successful event. "You know, I always thought success was about being at the top, having others beneath you. But watching what you have built here has made me reconsider." "How so?" "You have created something meaningful," he said thoughtfully. "Not just profitable, though clearly it is that too, but something with purpose. I never considered that aspect of business before." Before I could respond, we were joined by Hayes and several investors eager to discuss upcoming projects. The conversation shifted to business, but Jason's words stayed with me throughout the evening. Later that week, I had lunch with Amanda, who had witnessed the entire arc of our family drama from childhood to the present day. "If someone had told me a year ago that Jason would be coming to you for business advice, I would have checked them for a head injury," she remarked, shaking her head in amazement. "People can change," I replied, surprised to hear myself defending Jason. "When the stakes are high enough?" "True, but not everyone has the capacity for self-reflection that enables change," Amanda pointed out. "It took losing almost everything for Jason to see beyond his own ego." "And not everyone gets a second chance," I acknowledged, thinking of how easily I could have refused to help him when the Henderson project was failing. "That was your choice," Amanda said softly. "You could have watched him fail and felt justified after years of his treatment toward you. Instead, you offered help without humiliating him. That says more about you than about him." The observation made me reflect on my own journey. The path from that mortifying moment at the family reunion, when Jason suggested I should consider stripping to my current position, had not been solely about professional success. It had been about personal growth, about learning that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from maintaining your integrity even when facing cruelty. In the months following the reunion, I had worked with a therapist to process years of family dynamics that had shaped my self-perception. Healing from decades of subtle and not-so-subtle undermining had taken conscious effort and time. I had to recognize patterns of seeking validation that stemmed from never receiving it from my family, and learn to separate my worth from others' opinions of me. The greatest lesson had come not from triumph over Jason, but from my response to his failure. When presented with the opportunity to return the humiliation he had so often inflicted on me, I had chosen a different path. Not from naivety or misplaced loyalty, but from the recognition that perpetuating cycles of hurt only diminishes everyone involved. This did not mean forgetting the past or pretending the hurt had never happened. It meant making conscious choices about how that past would influence my present and future. I had established clear boundaries with my family, engaging with them on my terms rather than desperately seeking their approval. Perhaps most importantly, I had built relationships with people who valued me for my authentic self. My team at Williams Strategic Investments had become something of a chosen family, people, united by shared values and vision rather than mere blood ties. Hayes had proven to be not just a business partner, but a mentor who recognized and nurtured talent without the complicated emotional baggage of family expectations. A month after the presentation, I launched a mentorship program for young women interested in finance and sustainable investment. Many of the participants came from backgrounds where, like me, they had faced dismissal or diminishment of their ambitions. Success is not just about proving others wrong, I told them during our inaugural meeting. Though that can be satisfying, I added with a smile that earned knowing laughter. True success is about creating something meaningful on your own terms, something that reflects your values and vision. One young woman raised her hand. But how do you deal with people who try to tear you down along the way? Family, classmates, colleagues who tell you that you do not belong or cannot succeed? It was the question at the heart of my own journey, and I took a moment to formulate my answer carefully. Their words can only define you if you let them, I said finally. The most powerful response to those who doubt you is not argument or retaliation, but quiet, consistent action toward your goals. Silence can be more powerful than any comeback when that silence is filled with purposeful work. As the mentorship program grew, I occasionally invited Jason to speak to the group about the evolution of traditional businesses toward more sustainable models. His perspective as someone who had initially resisted change before embracing it offered valuable insights. These sessions also gave him the opportunity to develop a more thoughtful leadership style, one based on knowledge sharing rather than dominance. The journey was ongoing. Jason still occasionally slipped into old patterns of competition or dismissiveness, particularly when feeling insecure. My parents still sometimes treated my success as if it validated their parenting rather than my perseverance, despite their lack of support. Family gatherings still held moments of tension as we navigated our evolving relationships. But the difference now was that I faced these challenges from a position of inner security rather than desperate need for validation. I had proven to myself what I was capable of achieving, and that knowledge provided a foundation that could not be shaken by others' opinions or actions. On the anniversary of that life-changing family reunion, I declined my parents' invitation to attend this year's gathering. Instead, I hosted a small dinner at my home for the people who had truly supported me throughout my journey, Amanda Lauren Hayes, and key members of my team. It was a conscious choice to celebrate with those who had earned a place in my life, rather than those who claimed it by birthright. As we raised glasses in a toast, I looked around at the faces of people who had chosen to believe in me, to support my vision, to treat me with respect and genuine care. To finding family in unexpected places, I said, and to the power of silence in the face of doubt, sometimes the most eloquent response is simply to succeed on your own terms. Have you ever experienced someone underestimating you only to prove them wrong through your success? Share your story in the comments below. And if this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by others' opinions. Thank you for watching, and remember that sometimes silence truly is the most powerful response to those who doubt you.